Hello, I'm Gene Ovanek, and welcome to the Helpful Hoof Care Show. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to share with Dennis Rees a portion of his show to discuss some issues about horses' feet. Dennis and I have talked many times about how lameness has become almost an epidemic in a lot of horses in the horse industry in these modern times. And we're concerned about that, and Dennis has felt very strongly about the things that we're doing with natural balance and stuff, and he feels that there's some good information here, and of course we see tremendous results in being able to deal with a lot of lameness problems simply by preventing them to begin with. And throughout the next few weeks, we're going to have a series of shows on Dennis's program, on a small segment at the end, that will get an opportunity to discuss with you some of the anatomy features, discuss the parts of the foot, how they function, and give you some kind of insight into how you may be able to prevent lameness long before it becomes a serious problem. In the weeks to come, we're going to discuss with you some issues about the foot. We're going to show you what a normal foot looks like, one that's non-pathological, one that's abnormal, that has distortions that are eventually going to create some lamenesses. The thing that we've discovered is that we've almost, because lameness has become somewhat of an epidemic or near epidemic in many cases, that seems to be the threat that most people fear in their horses, in their horse activities, is that the horse would become lame. And the thing that I believe we haven't really understood completely is that we have come to justify a lot of hoof distortions. We fail to understand kind of what normal is. And because of that, we're going to give you some ideas about what the frog looks like, what a normal frog would be, what an abnormal one is, what a normal hoof configuration is, how to bisect the foot from the bottom, and give you some insight into seeing long before the horse becomes lame or has some issues with lameness when that's about to happen. These are most of the things that we're going to be discussing in this early part of this of these segments that we're going to be presenting in this show. So look forward to a lot of good information. A lot of it is very common sense, all has scientific support to it, and that is an important ingredient to all of the information we have. To finish out this segment of the show, we're going to talk about some of the terminology that we're going to be using throughout these next segments, and it's good to have a basic understanding of this terminology so that you kind of know where we're at anatomically, where these segments of the foot are when we use these terms. It's real common for most people to look at a foot, for instance, and say, well, this is the front and this is the back and this is the coronary band, and all of those things are important, and they're basic terms. But when you're talking with many farriers now, because farriers are becoming more and more educated, and veterinarians, we use a lot of the veterinary terms to help us describe specifically what we're talking about. And I think it's helpful for everyone to get a basic understanding of what those terms are. We're just going to use some general things. For instance, this is the anterior portion of the foot here in the front. This is the posterior. There's also other terms that relate to those portions of the foot as well. This would be, if you hear the term caudal, that's the back part. The dorsal, which is the front part of, let's say, the dorsal wall here. You'll hear that term an awful lot. And when it comes to looking at the bottom of the foot or the top part of the foot, and you look at the bottom part here, or the distal end, which is the most distant from the head, and that would be the ground surface, basically, of the bottom of the foot. Proximal, which would be the most closer to the head, which would be the upper part of the hoof. It's very commonly termed the proximal aspect of the hoof wall. So those are just general terms that we use for describing the different anatomy parts as we get into that segment. It's going to be a general and basic anatomy lesson. It's not going to go into detail about ligaments, tendons, and stuff like that, at least to any great degree. Only those that support the issues of navicular disease and things like that. We'll take a little time here and just go through the bony column and some of the connective tissue just a little bit. The common bone in the foot that everybody talks about is the coffin bone, and that's this one right here. It's shaped very much like the hoof capsule, and it's termed a lot of times, and you'll hear me say this, P3, which is the third phalanx. This is P1, P2, and P3. Those are the phalanx in the limb. And looking at most sections of the foot that you're inclined to see, because a lot of farriers carry these little hoof models along with them. If you're looking at this opened model like this, you only see half of the bone, which is this bone cut right down through the middle. So it's oftentimes hard to perceive that bone in its true form, which is like this. This model here is a better example of that because this is removed. It shows you that this bone is actually is in one solid piece, but with this model, it's nice that this model is made in this way. It makes it a whole lot easier to see. This, as I mentioned before, is P2, second phalanx bone, and P1. The coffin bone. You look at the inside, you'll see the navicular bone right here. You'll hear me talk about these bones in this region of the foot very specifically when I start talking about navicular disease. Most of the leading information about navicular disease relates to this area right underneath of the navicular bone and the ligaments that support the navicular bone from above. This is the bone, the navicular bone. It fits right in this segment. You can see what's remaining there. You can see the deep flexor tendon listed in yellow here, comes down, rides over the top of that navicular bone, and it attaches to the bottom of the coffin bone, or P3, in this region right here. I'm going to show you underneath here. It's right along this crest right here. It attaches, and it's a pretty wide band. Again, you only can appreciate a small segment of its attachment right here. Its attachment actually is quite large and covers the whole, virtually the ventral border or the bottom border of the bone. The next area of concern that relates to navicular disease, and we'll go over this again when we get to that segment, is this little ligament right here that attaches to the navicular bone, and it helps hold this bone down to the coffin bone. It attaches along this surface right here. You can see these vascular channels right there. That's where a large portion of the blood supply to the navicular bone occurs. And that's a critical issue with navicular disease. So good blood flow through that region is going to be of paramount importance to the health and well-being of this region of the foot. And that seems to be the part of the foot that suffers the most. That's the part that we are all concerned about, that eventually causes a lot of terminal lameness for our horses. We're going to talk more in depth about the soft tissue around this structure as we get to those portions. We're going to talk about the frog, the bars, the sole, the hoof wall, and how they all interdigitate together and how they work together to make this horse functionally sound.